Hey there. Seems like you're on the same page as us, wanting climate solutions that don't cost a fortune. Ones that hit that sweet spot between cutting emissions and keeping things affordable.
Yeah, it is interesting how much of the climate action talk is just about reducing carbon.
That's it.
Yeah, often missing the whole economic side of things. These sources we're looking at today really highlight that need for a more balanced approach.
For sure. It's like everyone's chasing this carbon zero dream, but how do we actually get there affordably? That's what caught my eye about David McLaughlin's article. He's pushing for a made-at-home climate plan.
Interesting.
It sounds pretty promising, right? What struck me is he's not just some academic. He's a former bigwig in the Canadian government.
Oh, wow.
So he's been in the trenches actually trying to implement climate policies.
And he's pretty critical of how Canada's doing things now. He's saying that a lot of the policies are pricey and divisive and likely not even going to hit their targets. McLaughlin's point is that these big top-down plans, like the Paris Agreement, don't really fit with Canada being a major energy player.
Yeah, it's that one-size-fits-all thing that always seems to backfire. Trying to make everyone fit the same mold never really works.
Exactly. It's uncomfortable and impractical.
So what's McLaughlin's solution then? What does this made-at-home plan actually look like?
He's got this three-part approach.
Okay.
A climate audit, domestic targets, and a total revamp of how the feds and provinces work together.
All right, let's break that down.
Okay.
A climate audit, is that like taking stock of where our emissions are coming from, or is it deeper than that?
It's more like, when you do a financial audit,
Right.
it's kind of like that. But for climate policies, taking a hard look at what's actually working, what's a waste of time, and what gives us the most emission reduction without breaking the bank.
I like that, not just chasing some random target, but making sure every dollar counts, both for the environment and the economy.
Yeah,
That really fits with that optimization angle we were talking about.
it does.
Being smart and efficient with our resources, that's key if we want to make real lasting change. But what about these domestic targets? Is he saying we should just ditch all the international agreements?
Not exactly. He gets that global teamwork is important, but he thinks Canada needs to set realistic goals that work for our situation.
Okay.
Instead of chasing those far-off targets way in the future, he's saying, let's focus on how much we can actually cut over, say, 5 years.
That sounds a lot more doable, right? Instead of this giant mountain to climb by 2050, we break it down into smaller steps.
Exactly.
But doesn't that risk us losing sight of the long game? How do we balance those short-term wins with the bigger picture?
It's a tough balance for sure. McLaughlin's thinking is that if we can rack up some wins in the short term, it'll build momentum, show that progress is possible. And that could lead to more innovation, more investment in climate solutions, and actually speed up progress towards those long-term goals.
So it's about building confidence, showing that we can make real progress without tanking the economy.
I like that approach. But what about this whole federal-provincial collaboration thing? Right now, it feels more like they're pointing fingers at each other than working together. How does McLaughlin want to fix that?
He's suggesting we scrap the current system, which often feels like the feds are just bossing everyone around,
Yeah.
and replace it with something he calls climate action agreements.
Okay.
So each province would team up with the federal government, and they'd make a custom climate plan that fits their specific needs and priorities.
That sounds promising, but wouldn't that lead to a patchwork approach? Like, do we risk losing that national unity? We need to tackle a global problem.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
But McLaughlin thinks that by tailoring the approach to each province,
Yeah.
it actually gets them more on board, leading to more effective action. He sees it as each province talking with their citizens, of course setting realistic targets and strategies, and then Ottawa chipping in financially based on how well they're doing. So giving provinces more ownership, but still keeping a national framework and some shared goals. Interesting. But I am curious, how do those tech-focused solutions we're seeing in the other sources fit into all of this? Can they help actually make these policy goals happen?
Absolutely. Imagine provinces using those climate action agreements to invest in like a backbone of smart grids.
Okay.
Systems that use data to predict energy demand and then automatically adjust the electricity flow to be as efficient as possible.
Hold on, before we go too far down that road, can you explain exactly what a smart grid is and how it actually works?
Think of it like a traditional grid is like driving without any traffic lights or a GPS. Energy is just flowing one way, and if there's a sudden surge or a problem, the whole thing can get jammed up.
Oh, I see.
A smart grid, on the other hand, it's like having real-time traffic management.
Oh, okay.
You've got sensors and smart meters constantly gathering data on energy use, and then AI algorithms, they analyze that data to predict demand and adjust the flow accordingly.
So it's like anticipating problems before they happen, like how Waze helps you avoid traffic jams.
Exactly.
But how does that actually translate into lower costs and lower emissions?
Well, a few ways. First, by optimizing the electricity flow, smart grids can cut down on those transmission losses, meaning less energy is wasted just getting it to people.
Okay.
Second, they can make it way easier to integrate renewable energy sources like solar and wind. So when sun's blasting and solar panels are pumping out extra power, the smart grid can automatically shift that energy to where it's needed or even store it for later.
So it's about making the whole system more flexible and responsive to the ups and downs of energy supply and demand. Makes a lot of sense. Got any real-world examples of where this is actually working?
Oh, tons. Cities all over are putting in smart grid tech. Chattanooga, Tennessee, for example.
Okay.
They went all in on smart grid infrastructure, and they've seen a big drop in power outages, and their peak energy demand has gone down too, which means lower costs for both the utility company and the people using the energy.
That's a great example of how smart grids can actually benefit both the environment and the people's wallets.
Yeah.
It's those win-win situations we're looking for.
Exactly.
But what about on a smaller scale? How can people contribute to this optimization thing at home?
That's where smart home technology comes in. Things like smart thermostats that learn your temperature preferences and adjust automatically to save energy, smart appliances that run during off-peak hours when electricity is cheaper and cleaner, even smart lighting systems that turn lights on and off based on whether someone's in the room.
So basically giving our homes a little energy IQ boost.
That's it.
These all seem like individual pieces, but how do we put them together into a bigger picture approach?
That's where data analytics and AI really shine. They let us gather and analyze tons of data about our energy habits and then use that info to find patterns and ways to optimize.
So like having a personal energy coach, but instead of a human, it's an AI crunching the numbers and giving us tips on how to use energy better.
Exactly. Imagine an app that tells you the best time to charge your EV, run the dishwasher, or even preheat the oven based on real-time energy prices and how clean the grid is. It could even connect to your smart appliances and do it all automatically.
Now that's what I call effortless energy optimization. But to be honest, all this talk about connected devices and data makes me a little uneasy. What about data privacy with all these smart technologies?
Oh, that's a huge concern, and it's something we can't ignore as these technologies become more common. It's about finding that balance between harnessing the power of data while protecting people's privacy.
So how do we do that? What are some practical things we can do to make sure our data is being used responsibly?
Transparency and user control are key. People need to know what data is being collected, how it's being used, and who has access to it. And good companies are already working on this, putting in strong security, having clear privacy policies, and giving users control over their data settings.
So demanding transparency and being informed consumers, that's something we can all do. But let's switch gears a bit and talk about another big energy user transportation. EVs are obviously a big part of the solution. But are there other tech innovations in this area that can help optimize both cost and carbon?
Definitely. It's not just about switching to electric vehicles.
Right.
There's a ton of innovation happening around making the whole transportation system smarter.
Like what? Give me some examples.
Well, think about AI-powered traffic management systems that can optimize traffic flow so there's less congestion and idling.
Okay.
That saves fuel and cuts emissions. Or imagine ride-sharing platforms that use algorithms to match people heading the same way so there are fewer cars on the road.
Yeah, that makes sense. Using tech to make our transportation systems more efficient. But how do we actually get people to use these new technologies and change their behavior?
That's where policies and incentives come in. Governments can invest in the infrastructure needed to support these technologies.
Like what?
Like charging stations for EVs and dedicated lanes for carpooling or public transit.
Right.
They can also offer financial incentives to get people to switch to cleaner modes of transportation or use energy-saving tech.
So a multi-pronged approach. Governments, businesses, individuals, all working together. It's about making it easier and more affordable for people to make those sustainable choices.
But let's be real, even with all this amazing technology, going green is going to require some tough choices, maybe some sacrifices, right?
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. Moving towards a sustainable future will mean some changes to how we live and consume. But I think we can frame those choices positively as opportunities to build a better future for ourselves and future generations.
It's about shifting our mindset from seeing sustainability as a burden to seeing it as an investment in a healthier, more resilient, and ultimately more fulfilling future. Okay, I'm feeling inspired. Any other tech-driven solutions we should explore before we wrap up?
Let's talk about energy storage. It's quickly becoming one of the most important things for creating a truly sustainable and resilient energy system. Energy storage, that sounds crucial, especially as we're talking about bringing more renewable energy into the mix.
Yeah.
But why is it so important?
Well, renewables like solar and wind power, they're intermittent by nature. Meaning the sun's not always shining, the wind's not always blowing. So we need a way to store the energy they make when it is available and then release it when we need it.
So energy storage is like a buffer smoothing out those bumps in renewable energy generation.
Yeah.
Like a giant battery for the whole energy grid.
Exactly. It lets us capture that clean energy and save it for later, making sure we have reliable electricity even when the sun's not out or the wind's not blowing.
I get it, that makes sense. But what exactly are we talking about when we say energy storage? What are some of the technologies involved?
There are actually a bunch of different energy storage technologies out there right now, each with its own pros and cons. One of the most well-known and widely used is pumped hydro storage, where you pump water uphill to a reservoir when there's extra electricity, and then release it downhill through turbines to generate electricity when demand is high.
So like a giant water battery using gravity to store and release energy. I've heard of that.
Yeah.
But are there other options that might work better in different places or for different uses?
Absolutely. Another promising tech is battery storage, which has come a long way recently, especially with lithium-ion batteries. These batteries can store huge amounts of electricity and release it quickly when needed, making them perfect for handling those fluctuations in renewable energy generation.
So basically a giant backup battery for the whole grid.
Pretty much, and battery tech is getting better all the time. Researchers are always looking for new chemistries and designs to make them hold more energy, cost less, and last longer.
This is all super interesting.
Yeah.
But are there any downsides to battery storage?
Like anything, there are trade-offs. Batteries can be expensive, they don't last forever, and they need to be managed carefully for safety and performance.
So not a perfect solution, but still a key part of the puzzle. Are there any other energy storage technologies being explored?
Oh yeah, lots. Researchers are looking into things like compressed air energy storage, thermal energy storage, even hydrogen storage. Wow.
Each one has its own quirks and potential uses, and as research continues, we'll probably see even more creative solutions pop up.
It sounds like a whole world of energy storage innovations out there. We're uncovering a secret weapon against climate change.
That's a great way to put it. But with so many options, how do we figure out which tech is best for each situation?
That's a great question. I'm guessing there's no one-size-fits-all solution.
Nope. Choosing the right energy storage tech depends on a lot of things. The size of the project, the location, the type of energy being stored, and what it's actually being used for.
So matching the tool to the job. Got it. As the energy landscape keeps changing, we'll need to be flexible and adaptable, using a mix of technologies to meet our growing energy needs sustainably and reliably. Makes sense. But what about those technologies that actually pull carbon out of the air?
You're talking about carbon capture and storage, or CCS, and direct air capture, or DEC.
Okay.
These are getting a lot of buzz as potential game changers in the fight against climate change. I've heard those terms, but honestly, I'm not totally clear on what they mean. Can you break them down for us?
Sure. CCS basically means grabbing carbon dioxide emissions from industrial sources like power plants and factories, and then transporting and storing it underground so it doesn't go into the atmosphere.
So like a giant vacuum cleaner for carbon emissions.
That's a good way to think about it. And while it might sound like sci-fi, CCS is actually a proven technology, it's been used for decades in different ways, like enhanced oil recovery.
Wait, hold up. Did you just say enhanced oil recovery? I thought we were talking about climate solutions not getting more fossil fuels.
Yeah, that's a fair point. And it's one of the reasons CCS has been controversial. It can be used to cut emissions from fossil fuel plants, but it's also been used to get more oil and gas, which obviously contributes to climate change.
So it's a bit of a double-edged sword. The technology itself isn't inherently good or bad, but how it's used can have either positive or negative effects on the environment.
Exactly. And that's why we need clear rules and policies to make sure CCS is used responsibly, mainly for cutting emissions.
So setting the right incentives and safeguards to make sure it's a climate solution and not a way to keep us hooked on fossil fuels.
Okay, that makes sense. But what about this direct air capture thing? How does that work?
DSI is similar to CCS in that it grabs carbon dioxide,
Right.
but instead of getting it from industrial sources, it pulls it straight out of the air. Think of them like giant air purifiers for the planet.
Wow, that sounds amazing. Is that actually possible on a large scale?
It's still early days, but DC has shown promise in pilot projects. There are already companies running commercial-scale DC plants, and the tech is advancing quickly.
So it's not just a theory anymore, it's actually happening. That's wild.
No.
But what happens to the carbon dioxide after it's captured? Where does it go?
That's the key question. There are a few options for storing captured carbon dioxide, each with its own pluses and minuses. One is geological storage, which means injecting the CO2 deep underground into porous rock formations.
Like depleted oil and gas reservoirs or saline aquifers.
It's basically pumping it back into the earth where it came from.
Yep. And geological storage can hold massive amounts of CO2 for really long periods.
Okay, sounds pretty secure. Any other options being considered?
Another one is mineralization, which means reacting the CO2 with certain types of rocks to create solid carbonate minerals. Basically turning CO2 into stone.
Whoa, that's cool. So we can actually turn carbon dioxide into a harmless solid?
It's a pretty neat process, and it has the potential to lock away CO2 permanently in a really stable form. There's also ocean storage, which is injecting CO2 into the deep ocean where it would dissolve and be stored for a long time.
Hold on, doesn't the ocean already absorb a ton of CO2 from the atmosphere? Wouldn't adding more just make things worse?
That's a valid concern, and it's something scientists are studying closely. Ocean acidification is a big problem, and we need to make sure any ocean storage methods don't make it worse.
So it's a delicate balance, and we need to be careful and do our research. Which approach do you think is most promising for carbon storage?
They all have their own strengths and weaknesses. Geological storage is proven and can hold a lot of CO2, but you need to choose the right sites and monitor them carefully. Mineralization is permanent, but can be energy intensive. Ocean storage is still new, and there are worries about how it might affect marine life.
Sounds like we need a mix of solutions, each tailored to specific situations and carefully evaluated for any potential risks and benefits.
You got it. There's no one-size-fits-all answer when it comes to carbon capture and storage.
This is a lot to take in. We've covered so much ground from smart grids to carbon capture, and it's clear there's a lot of innovation happening in climate solutions. But I'm curious, beyond these specific technologies, are there any bigger trends or principles guiding this innovation?
One of the most exciting trends is how different fields are coming together, like energy transportation and information technology. The lines are blurring as these sectors team up to create integrated solutions.
Can you give an example of what that looks like in practice?
Imagine electric vehicles that not only get you around, but also act as mobile energy storage units, feeding power back into the grid when needed.
Cool.
Or buildings that make their own renewable energy, store it on site, and even share it with nearby buildings, creating a microgrid that's more resilient and efficient.
Okay, now that's a picture of the future I can get behind.
Yeah.
It's like we're moving towards this interconnected intelligence system where everything works together to use energy better and minimize our impact on the environment. But with all this talk about technology, are we forgetting about the human factor? At the end of the day, aren't people's choices and behaviors the biggest drivers of climate change?
Absolutely. Technology can give us the tools, but we have to use them wisely. We have to make conscious choices about how we live, what we buy, and how we get around.
So finding ways to connect those technological innovations with changes in human behavior.
Exactly. We need to create systems that make it easier and more appealing for people to make sustainable choices. And we need to have open and honest conversations about the challenges and opportunities ahead, knowing that we're all in this together.
I love that. It's about creating a sense of shared responsibility and collective action. But how do we actually make those changes happen? Where do we even begin?
Well, it's a big question, right? It's about having a plan that tackles the problem from all sides.
Okay, so get specific. What are some concrete things we can do to connect these tech innovations with changing how people act?
Information is huge. We need to give people the knowledge to understand their own energy habits and the impact of their choices. Imagine an app that tracks your energy use and gives you personalized tips on how to shrink your carbon footprint and save money on your energy bills.
So like a Fitbit, but for your energy use, giving you real-time feedback and nudging you towards greener choices.
Exactly.
I like that.
What else? Incentives can work really well. Governments can use things like carbon pricing or tax credits to reward sustainable choices. Businesses can offer discounts or loyalty programs for customers who choose eco-friendly products or services.
So making it pay to be green makes sense. But what about people who say these kinds of incentives are just the government messing with the market or taking away freedom?
It's complicated for sure. There are strong arguments on both sides. But I think if they're done right, incentives can be a powerful way to make positive change happen. It's about finding that sweet spot between individual freedom and our responsibility to each other.
That's a really important point. It's not about forcing people to change, but making it easier and more appealing to choose the sustainable option. But let's face it, changing behavior is hard. It's easy to feel overwhelmed or like your actions don't matter when we're talking about a global problem like climate change.
I get that. But it's so important to remember that every little thing we do, every step we take towards living more sustainably adds up. It all makes a difference.
So giving people that sense of ownership and agency, making them feel like they're part of the solution.
Exactly.
I love that. But how do we change the story around climate change? Right now, it's all doom and gloom. How do we make it more hopeful and inspiring?
Yeah, the focus is often on the problems and the scary stuff that could happen, which can make people feel stuck. We need to talk more about the solutions and the opportunities, highlight the amazing innovations happening, and show off the people who are working hard to make a better future.
So showcasing those wins and getting others excited to join the movement.
Exactly. And I think it's important to highlight the other benefits that come with climate action.
Quite.
It's not just about saving the planet, it's about creating a healthier, more prosperous, and fairer world for everyone.
That's powerful. Connecting climate action to things everyone cares about. Clean air, good jobs, a more equal society. It's an investment in a better future, not a sacrifice.
Exactly. And I think that's a message that can connect with people from all walks of life, no matter their political views.
Well said. We've covered a ton of ground today exploring this complex world of climate solutions and diving into all these incredible technological innovations. What are your final thoughts for our listeners?
We've seen that there's no one-size-fits-all answer to climate change. It's going to take a multi-pronged approach, using a bunch of different strategies, technologies, and changes in how we live. But the most important thing I want to leave people with is this: don't underestimate your own power. Every choice you make, every step you take towards living more sustainably contributes to a better future.
That's so important. Knowing that we all have a part to play in creating the world we want. And with that, I think it's time to wrap up this deep dive into climate solutions. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey.
It's been great. And to everyone listening, thank you for being curious and for caring about building a more sustainable future.
We hope you've learned something new today, and we encourage you to keep digging into these ideas and stay involved in the fight for a healthy planet.
Remember, we have the technology, the smarts, and the will to solve this.
Absolutely. This has been The Deep Dive signing off.